Okay, we are live once again.
Great. Good evening. I would like to call the Henrietta Town Board meeting for June 9th, 2021 to order. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Here.
Councilmember Stafford,
Here.
Councilmember Safranek,
Here.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Here.
Supervisor Schultz.
Here. We'll begin tonight with a silent prayer followed by the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. No, upwards. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
My apologies. I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes from the May 26, 2021 Town Board meeting. Seconded.
Any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford, Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye. I'd just like to make mention that Scrivener's error was brought to our attention today. Howard Russell, I suspect it was auto-corrected to Howard Russell. So he brought that to our attention and we just fixed it as a Scrivener's error. But that's for the May 12th, 2021. It was resolution 10-130, establishing the Friends of the Educators Grove Committee, or whatever we're going to call it. So like I said, I just wanted to make sure people were aware we did that. Okay, first up, we have public hearing. American Public Works Association, new building structure award for the Henrietta Public Library. Craig Eckert is going to do the presentation. Craig?
Thank you. 1 second. Jenny is asking for a picture of the award. I have to ask the clerks. They trained me well.
Although not super well because you weren't talking into a microphone.
No. They can only train me so far.
And Becky wins the best hat award.
Unless somebody else comes in
right?
with one like
Hey,
this.
that was my creation.
Yes. Well, it's got a little bit of a glare to it. So, hi, thank you. Sorry for the delay on that. I'm going to change hats with you all tonight as the director for Monroe County of the American Public Works Association. Unbeknownst to me, the awards committee has selected the town library as the project of the year in the structural category in the 5 to 25 million range. This is a phenomenal award given it once a year to a project through the multi-county area. We have Ontario County, Genesee, Livingston County available in our chapter. This library has, of course, just been an absolute gem to this community. And I really want to congratulate Adrian for all of the work that she put into this to make this. I hope that we were able to create a library that just exudes Adrian, and I think we have. I think we've been able to do that. The first and foremost thing was heat and air conditioning. We've nailed that, and on top of that, I think continued to work on the spaces. So I really want to congratulate Adrian and her staff on all the hard work that they did to create this wonderful gem for the community. And the APA would like to present her with that award for that for that work and for that building.
Come on.
This is too tall for me.
Yeah, it's a slight height difference.
So, the result of the library is so beautiful, but it was really the process that to me was the most beautiful thing. It was so collaborative. We had a team working on the planning. I just felt like it was just so many people coming together and bringing their best selves to the table in pursuit of a goal of making a really functional, wonderful, beautiful library for the community that's so appreciated and so heavily used. And over the last year, which has been such a challenge, I've appreciated it even more. It's such a flexible space. We were able to so easily pivot with the pandemic to meet all the needs that we had to, that we never could have done in the space we had previously been in. So, and now we're, flipping it back as things are changing again. And I just know this is going to be a building not only for today, but for decades to come. So I think it's worthy of an award. And not just because of what I did. I said what we needed, but it was Passero and our architects, EC4B, who did a lot of engineering work, Vargas, who did a lot of design, certainly Krista, Javen, and all the contractors who did all that really hard, good work that made us such a beautiful space. So thank you very much. All of you were involved in it too. So it's an award for all of us. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then to extend on to that, I wanted to make sure that you were aware, I didn't do this with as much fanfare as I probably should have, but I did present Steve with also a copy of this, just so that you are all aware. Hard to put into words what it's like to come into position as the supervisor that he did, to learn everything that he did, and then to continue that project as he did. So I want to commend the supervisor and all the other town board members that had work in that. So I did present Steve with his own plaque. On top of that, you're all aware of the immense project work that went in from the town. There is no other municipality can do what we did, not once, but twice. The work with the engineering department with Chris Martin's team was influential in the design work. We saved just countless thousands of dollars in that design work that we were able to save the constituents. And on top of that, the DPW themselves going out as, again, a subcontractor to go out and complete the work that we would pay another sub to do ourselves, save the town a ton of money. So I have also given Chris Martin an award, and this one here was not one that I had been able to present publicly to Catalano, the DPW, Mike, or to Chuck Marshall, Tim Lessing, and that group for their work as well, because it was absolutely a team effort, and it just came out glorious. So I just want to be sure that I thank everyone for that work and that teamwork that came together for that. Okay, so I'll have this one for them. Thank you.
I will note that my first decisions as supervisor was on this project. In fact, it was prior to me actually taking the supervisor position. So I'd gotten a call from former Deputy Town Supervisor Peter Minotti the day after the election, and he and my predecessor, Jack Moore, brought me in, and basically we started, they basically said, this is going to be under you, so you should be making these decisions. So that started early November of 2017, and wasn't without problems, whether it was issues with land conveyance or steel shortages or steel prices going up or skylights, especially skylights. But it's been a great project. And interestingly enough, when it started, we had a 50-50 board, Republican, Democrat, and we got everything done. So contrary to what's happening in Washington, where you have partisan politics, this town proved that bipartisan can work if you got people who put town before party. So thank you to everybody who was involved. And again, especially thank you to the library staff and all their input and help on really putting together a layout that really serves the community, and to the engineering staff and the DPW staff who helped save constituents money. Because as you can imagine, building a library this size isn't cheap, and to get there on time and under budget, it takes a lot of work. So again, thank you to everybody who was involved. Anything else?
Where's your award?
It's in my office.
Okay. I wanted to see him present it to you, but you got away this time.
Yeah. I might have had to wear big boy pants if I, instead of my shorts. Okay, thank you very much, Craig. And again, congratulations to everybody involved. Next up, we have a public hearing. Well, I guess we'll close. That wasn't exactly a public hearing, public presentation.
Right.
Next up, we have a public hearing to consider designating 1063 Erie Station Road as a historic site. Do we have somebody from the Historic Site Committee? Yes, we do. All right. Gary, introduce yourself and go ahead.
Gary Goodrich, Chairman of the Henrietta Historic Site Committee. Good evening, Mr. Supervisor and members of the Town Board. The Henrietta Historic Site Committee received an application from the owners of the property at 1063 Erie Station Road requesting to be designated as a historic site of Henrietta. As required, a survey has been done and the property has been photographed. This early 1830s Greek Revival style farmhouse located on the southwest corner of the present-day Erie Middle Road intersection was built by the Sherman family. The 1902 map of Henrietta calls this intersection Sherman's Corners, and an older map actually called the hill behind it Sherman Hill, because they owned a very large amount of acreage there. The two-story farmhouse is wooden. We have pictures now, both of which are consistent with the construction methods of the early 1800s. Our research has found that the original purchase of the 37 acres at the northeast corner of Lot 26 in the fourth range of lots in Henrietta was made by Caleb Sherman from Cornelius Charles VI, who owned pretty much all of Monroe County at that point in time, on the 25th of April in 1820. Deed records show that Jarvis Sherman purchased the property from his father, Caleb, July 1st, 1832. In addition, in 1836, Jarvis bought an additional 59 acres of that lot. In Henrietta Heritage, Eleanor Kalsbeck states, Jarvis Sherman and Richard Wilkins built the first frame hotel very close to the corner where the hotel is now, before it was moved. Jarvis Sherman ran a meat market in the commercial block of West Henrietta, and from original town board meeting minutes that Tina just went through the archives and looked at for me, Jarvis Sherman received 204 of the 320 votes cast to become the Henrietta Town Supervisor in 1858. At that time, town officers were elected each year, so they served for a year. Lucky you, right?
Yeah. You thought it was bad every two.
Yep. He was appointed postmaster for the West Henrietta Post Office on March 20th in 1861. The Sherman family is found at this location on the historical maps and tax records of Henrietta from 1852 until 1885. Unfortunately, there is no earlier maps or records that we have found at this point in time. The Henrietta Historic Site Committee, after consideration of the property survey, the photos, and the historical research, feel that the property meets the requirements of Henrietta Town Code Section 295-38, Standards for Designation of a Historic Site, Factors A and C, and has voted and road a historic site and added to the Henrietta Historic Site rolls. Thank you. And we do have the homeowner here if you guys have any questions.
That'd be great. Coming up.
Tyler Keller, 1063 Erie Station Road.
All right. Do you guys have any questions? Well, for those who don't know, Tyler also has been recently joined the Historic Site Committee, right?
Indeed.
And has been involved in a bunch of stuff, especially in the southwest, or excuse me, the West Hamlet. So
Tyler, what attracted you to the property?
So I've lived in West Henrietta 10 years, almost to the day, at an engineering firm right on West Henrietta Road in the West Hamlet.
Okay.
So I drove past it every single day. In passing, had a conversation with my boss of, how both of us would both love to buy it if it ever went up for sale. And we'd probably put a bidding war up between the two of us. It went up for sale. He was in the position to buy it, so I did.
Oh, congratulations.
I will note that it was my wife's idea, and I consider it the smartest, stupid thing I've ever done. But nonetheless,
Well, we're glad you did, and congratulations too.
thank you. And on a personal note, I am a structural engineer by trade. So this is just right up my alley to restore this house and bring it back to life.
That's great.
It is a beautiful building. And it looks like you're reconverting it back into a single-family home?
Correct, yes.
That's great.
The previous owners had kind of, I don't want to speak ill of them, but they made it into a duplex and not the best way. It doesn't fit the house very well. Doesn't represent the character that the house has. So yes, we are converting it back to a single family.
That's great.
Right.
And how much acreage is attached to the house? Just out of curiosity.
Surprisingly small amount.
Yeah.
It's only 0.43 acres.
Oh, okay. That is a surprisingly small amount.
If anyone wants to ever drive past it, I have the front two corners staked out.
Mm-hmm.
And we only go back by 225 feet.
I see.
And I guess I would say for the record, where our fence line is, and in this photo right here, where the grass stops being greened, that is the edge of the property. The space between, in this photo where the grass stops being green to Mill Road is owned by someone else. I have contacted him to purchase it off. At this point, they are not interested in that.
I see.
I do intend to further pursue that. And in that case, I intend to make that not full of brush. I know there's a bunch of concern about the intersection of Middle and Area Station roads. And needless to say, with me living right there, I want to do everything I can to help out there, make the intersection better, cleaner,
Right.
easier to see and drive through.
Yeah.
In the perfect world, I was able to pick that up. I would love to do either a large community garden there or a small scale vineyard and my logic there is if there's something beautiful like that, maybe people will stop at the stop sign and look over rather than just blowing through it.
Not when they're looking at their phone texting, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Very good.
I can just say anytime I go by it, I've often wondered about it, and it was great to hear some of the history tonight on it. So
Yes.
thank you, and thanks for restoring it.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
It's exciting that you're going to do that. And I agree with Mike. As a kid, I just always remember looking at that house and just being like, wow, it's just such an amazing house. And I'm so glad that you're restoring it. It's really a blessing to the town community.
Thank you.
I do have some hands raised if you'd like to speak with anyone in the public.
Sure.
First up, I have Kevin Yost.
Kevin?
Kevin, 1474 Middle Road. Good evening. I have lived near the corner of Middle Road and Western Maritime Line Road for just over 46 years now, since I was a month and a half old. So most of my life when I wasn't away in college or at summer camp or traveling, I traveled past the house just at least once every day of my life pretty much. And as a member of the Henry Historical Society and a former president, former vice president of them, I wholeheartedly support this and hope that the Historical Society Committee and the town board also do this to other historic properties in the town in the future, such as on the other side of the hill, maybe the Gannett House, and that the hill for past several decades has been known as Gannett Hill because the farm on the other side of the hill on Middle Road, and the North Tinker property without the town purchasing that. And I know that a previous owner of the house who lived there with their mother, Dr. Drusilla Estia, a chiropractor, passed away recently. She had been my mother's chiropractor in the late, my late mother's chiropractor in the late 80s at a practice on the corner of East Seminary Valley and East Seminary and Hampson. I should move locations along there, but so preserving this property as a town landmark is the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks,
Thank
Kevin.
you, Kevin.
Do you have another?
Yes, I also have Catherine Nuss.
Catherine?
Hi there. Yes, great idea. Storing beautiful building.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any others? Anybody in the audience? Any additional comments from the board? There'll be another chance when the resolution comes up. But just, okay, hearing no further comments, I'm going to close the public hearing. Thank you very much. And like I said, we'll be voting on it later in the agenda.
Thank you, Mrs. Spicer.
Thank you.
Next up, we have a public hearing for the proposed law to amend the Henrietta Town Code at Chapter 240 to revise driveway regulations. So, you know, one of the things that we've seen a lot with the driveways is that there are a number of people who come in for variances, often for similar things that 99% of the time get approved. That creates additional work for the town staff as well as additional costs for the homeowners. So we look to, basically, we spent a lot of time going through that code with a bunch of the folks involved and figuring out, you know, minor changes to deal with some of that. In addition, we streamlined it because there was 3 different sections of code that mentioned setbacks. And so if you had to move your whole driveway over and each portion of that driveway was in a different section, you actually had to get 3 variances. So we changed it now so that all setbacks is in one location. So you just get a single setback that covers driveways, extension, turnarounds, anything. So, and one of the other things we added was we were giving variances in order for some properties, they're on a busy road and it's dangerous to back into or out of the driveway. And so they want to put a turnaround. But when you add that turnaround perpendicular to the main driveway, it makes the driveway exceed the width, in which case it would give a variance for the width. And as a recipient of one of these, I'll tell you, you know, so we put on the thing, but the variance basically says I can have a driveway up to 40 feet wide. So I could now take my entire driveway beyond the right of way and make it 40 feet wide, which obviously was not the intention of the variance. So we actually put a section of code in there for the driveway turnarounds. Now, one of the things we didn't want to see is people applying for them to put in for essentially extra parking, because you know that there's, as many people know, there are, you know, a lot of houses that get purchased and turned into rental properties, especially for students. We don't want to see massive parking lots in the front of houses. So what we did is we made it for, we wanted it to be for major roads where it's dangerous, but it was, how do we define that? So we decided to do it, allow just for county or state roads, because all the county and state roads are busy roads. There are some town roads that also fall into that, but we didn't know how to define it. We decided we'll leave those as a variance. One of the area variances, and it talks about this in the code, one of the area variances you can get, so you can keep all the dimensions of the driveway, it would just allow you to have it for your road. In other words, the area that you're getting a variance for is that it would be a town road. And so we figured the zoning board could make that determination as to whether that driveway really needs a turnaround because of safety issues, or if it's just somebody trying to expand their parking. So that's the majority of the code. Like I said, a lot of it was cleanup and clarification. And especially with the stuff that we had the most variances on, which were driveway extensions, setbacks, some widths. One of the other things we did clarify is that the portion in the right of way, is not, in other words, requires the approval of the superintendent of highway for whomever owns that right of way. So for a town road, it would be the town superintendent of highway. For a county road, it would be the county superintendent of highways. And for the state road, it would be the state superintendent of highways. So you can't get a variance from that. And my point being, if they basically limit you to some number of feet, you can't get a variance on that because it's not your, in other words, they have the right, they have control over that. And our zoning board doesn't have the authority to override them. It's a different portion of law. It's highway law, not zoning law. So I just mentioned that because that was not clear in the past. And that caused some problems where zoning board, unaware of it, granted the variance, and we ended up with driveway entrances that caused issues for the highway department. So we cleared that up and made it clear that if you want to go beyond that, you would need both a variance from the rules plus approval from the superintendent of highway. If you either get turned down for the variance or the superintendent of highway says no, then you can't go beyond the specified width in the right of way. So any other questions, comments? I don't know if anybody here would like to talk. If so, come on up to the microphone. Is there anybody online with their hand raised?
I do have Kevin Yost here with his hand raised. Hang on, let me unmute.
Kevin Yost, 1474 Middle Road. Good evening. Of course, my road, Middle Road, is a county road, County Road 88. My driveway is somewhat hourglass. It is especially middle lower part of the driveway is a little bit hourglass, and then really widens out where there's a space off to the side, this side of the front of the garage. That's where I, of course, inherited the stayed in this house, this property, since my late parents passed away, and one space is where my father would keep the classic 73 Ford F-350 that he didn't use in the winter time. We put the camper on before we couldn't use that anymore, and then I had my mother had her SUV, and my father had his car they parked in the garage, and I had my car after I started driving in '99. And I've been considering slightly widening the driveway so it's not so hourglass anymore, although it is close to the property line. And would have to remove at least one bush. Hopefully would not have to move the other two or three flower bushes. And it's because of the driveway hourglass, it almost wind up on the grass one side or the other, backing out down the driveway. And sometimes it is hard to see cars coming from the south with the utility pole there, and it's especially hard to see cars or bicycles.
Kevin, can I?
Coming from the south when I have the garbage choke there.
Can I interrupt a second, Kevin? So
Yes, I'm finished.
if you're asking whether you'd be able to, under this rule, put in a turnaround?
No, I'm not a turnaround, but just slightly widening the driveway so it's not so hourglass. We're slightly widening it to the south near a property line.
So again, I don't know the width, but yes, one of the things that this did go is to a slightly wider for the driveway beyond the right of way. So in other words, from between the right of way and inward to your property. So you may want to look at the code, and if it does work, then just apply for a driveway permit. And
Yes, I'd have to. I talked to the contractor that it's supposed to be spraying my driveway a couple days mid next week. Western New York Ceiling and Paving, and then they said that they can't do it till spring or the late summer or fall because they're booked until then. And I said I had to wait until after this public hearing anyway.
yeah, so, okay. So yeah, I would definitely, if you've already put in a permit and you wish to modify it, just come in and come to the building department, tell them what changes you'd like to make.
I have to wait till I talk to the Western York Ceiling Paving late summer, early fall. And that's the first step. And then the building department after that.
Great, sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Becky, does anyone else have their hand raised?
Not at this time.
Any other comment? Go ahead, coming up to the microphone.
Hi, my name is Dave Pierce, 181 Garden Parkway. I'd like to thank you all for serving as a town board and all that.
Thanks.
I was here originally when they put those codes in place for the town, for the driveway extensions. That was in 2007. Back then, this place was packed. There's a lot of people that were objecting against it. There's a few that were for. I get the people who live near colleges, the parties. I get that. The bulk of the town is not partying, college town. There's a lot of residents around here. They're not all duplexes. For me, I don't have to worry about that because I'm grandfathered in. I took care of that before those codes even went into effect. But I'm more concerned about the other people who live in the town. If you have a person who's got 4 kids or maybe 2 kids, maybe got 4 cars, you want to park them. All right. Well, if you got a turnaround and you can't park in that turnaround, and now you got to take those 2 cars and you stack them 2 and 2. It'd be nice to stack them to the right. Maybe you have a turnaround for turning around, but now you 2 kids have 2 cars and now you can't, the way they're positioned, you got to back out into the street anyways. Same thing with the driveway extensions. The driveway extensions, there's a rule that you can't put your primary cars on there. Okay, so you can put all your skidoos or trailers or whatever, all that other stuff on there. It doesn't make any sense because now you just spent $7,000 to $12,000 on that piece of property. The town is taking the taxes off that on the assessment, and you're restricted for parking your vehicle on there. What I'm saying is that the people should be allowed to park their vehicles on there. There's other ways to move around this issue. There's, if someone has got a duplex, maybe you can say, hey, you're applying to make this into a duplex. Okay, we're going to apply these restrictions for what you can park and can't park. Don't apply it to the whole town. Because what's going on here is you're turning this whole town into an HOA. How do I know this? Because when I came into this town, I looked at all the codes and where can I park my RV? Oh, great. I don't have to worry about where I park my RV. Well, after I created my driveway and widened it and everything else, I see this stuff going on. Next thing you know, here comes the town codes. You're switching them around. So, okay, maybe I'm not affected, but if I decide to move into another house in Henrietta, I'm definitely now affected. And now I have to stack my cars 2 on 2 instead of having the luxury of stacking 2 cars in the front and 2 cars to the side, which definitely makes it easier for the whole entire family from moving in and out. So you're adding more restriction onto everybody. So what I'm saying is there's a better way to do this by incorporating it into another thing. So what I'm requesting, and I'm sure there's a lot of people in this town who would do the same thing if they had the time to come down here, is to repeal the part about you can't park your vehicle on an extension or a turnaround. That's just, you're being too restrictive. I looked up the town codes for Brighton and Pittsford back in 2007, looked it up for other places too. You guys are way more restrictive than the rest of them. I mean, RVs, trailers, they at least let you put your smaller trailers in the back. And here's the other thing you got to think of from a law enforcement standpoint. Okay, and your property. Thieves go down the street. They see what you got down there. They see you got skidoos. They see this, they see that. You're putting all your assets in the thief's view. How do you prevent that? You put them behind your house. And especially if you got a larger property, I don't see why that can't happen. And what I would like to know is from someone on the board or the supervisor, why we can't do that, or what would make it so hard that we can't allow people to park their cars on the driveway extension or on the turnaround.
So first off, the other restrictions you've talked about, we're not adding those restrictions. Those are already there. In terms of the driveway extension, we actually added more capability to the driveway extension. So you do have the ability to bring it back. behind your house now towards an auxiliary structure. So that if you do have a barn or other stuff down there, you could park your vehicles, your stuff in the barn or other stuff like that. As far as why it was made that way, you'd have to go back in the minutes. That was long before I was ever involved. I don't know if anybody here knows all the reasoning behind it. But again, when we were doing this, I was not looking to change a lot of those types of things. I was mostly trying to clean up some of the inconsistencies in the code and the things that caused the greater conflicts in variances. In terms of, you say there aren't a lot of people here, and maybe that is because we aren't changing those requirements, because again, I do know, and by the way, there's very few duplexes in town. It's not duplexes, it's people who have turned single-family homes into rental properties. And I realize that doesn't happen in the whole town, but it's happening in far more of the town today. And I will tell you, I get far, far, far more complaints about neighbors who have turned their house into a parking lot or spilling out in the street than I do about people who are unable to park their vehicles wherever. I understand what you're saying. To answer your question as to why motorized vehicles aren't allowed to be parked on the grass, because motorized vehicles shed oils and other stuff, and it can contaminate the ground soil. There's issues in that regards. That plays a part of it. But again, this law doesn't propose changing that. This law basically simplifies the process by which people can go out and build driveways, and reduces the number of variants they need to get so as to reduce their stuff. One other comment you made that I would like to correct, you say that I can verify with the assessor, based on some other discussions I have, I don't think you adding to your driveway in any way changes your assessed value for your house. In terms of, the town gets taxation for that, the town's tax is about 4% of the taxes you pay. So it's not really, that's not exactly a valid argument in my opinion. Your opinion may vary, but anyway, like I said, I understand what you're saying. I just was not interested in opening that can of worms right now.
Okay, in the future, are you going to be willing to open that portion up as far as allowing people to somehow park on their turnarounds and their extensions after they paid for all that money to pave it and everything else, and to make it easier for their home life? Or are we going to leave that restriction in place? Because really, like I said, 2007, they redid like 130, 140 codes. I mean, they did a whole bunch. And looking back, last night, sitting back, looking through the town codes, I'm looking at all the different stuff that's been passed, and we're just turning into a homeowners association. I didn't come to Henrietta for a homeowners association. That's why I don't live in one. But when you start putting all these extra restrictions on us, how we can use our properties, and what I'm doing is I'm offering suggestions that are like simple ones. Simple ones like if you got a small trailer or something, you can put it in the back. It's not harming anything. Okay, it's not leaking oil. It's just a trailer. And, suppose I don't own any Ski-Doos or water ski jets or whatever, but maybe somebody would like to hide that in the back so that way they don't got to worry about someone stealing them, because there's a lot of thievery going on and crime is going up. Last thing we want to do is become victims of it. And I'm sure
Right.
I speak for everybody.
Okay, and I understand that. At some point, I'd be happy to have you come in, and I will take you to all the properties that we have to deal with that violate the stuff that cause, it's my guess is where those rules came from, is there are a number of problem properties. And the problem is, as soon as you allow that parking back there, it gets abused. Now, is there a way to write it that can deal with those problem properties and allow what you said? Potentially. As someone who's lived here since 1980, I don't feel that I don't agree with your characterization of that we live in an HOA. But I understand you're welcome to, and that's your right for your opinion. And again, I understand you're putting forth some suggestion, and there, you know, could we look at that in the future? We could. Whether we will or not, I can't speak for the board. That's up to whomever. There are a number of other changes that I would rather see before that one. But as I've always said, I'll entertain any suggestion. Some people get mad at me and say, how can you entertain that? Because that's my job, is to listen. So whether I would put that forth, I'm not sure. I'd want to take a look at that and talk with code enforcement. But you know, certainly there's 5 of us up here. Any one of us can put stuff on, so.
All right, here's a suggestion. If you took a look at Pittsford's, they have it written up pretty easy, certain dimensions and sizes and stuff like that. I mean, it's simple, you know, and in fact, that I see what you're doing with the town code for all the different setbacks and everything. It's got its purpose. I understand that. I'm not objecting to. Sometimes, you know, makes it a little simpler for people when they're applying for a driveway or widening it. But when you're trying to make use of your property and you don't want everything sitting on your front yard and you want to be able to use your vehicles to park anywhere you want on that extension, I think that's a restriction that we shouldn't have.
Okay,
Okay, I appreciate your time.
you bet.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
I do have some hands raised in the virtual audience.
Go ahead.
First up is Catherine Nuss.
Catherine?
Hi, Catherine Nuss, 32 New Tudor Road. And I think the turnarounds are a great idea. So people can pull in, they can back around so that they pull out onto a busy highway. I think for safety purposes, that's wonderful. As far as a lot of parking on the road, I know I live in an area where our driveways are fairly short. And when a lot of people park in their driveways, it makes it unsafe for other people trying to back out. And at one time, people were very cognizant of that fact. And I think in today's world, people forget that their neighbors have to try and back out almost into the road. But the turnaround to me is a great idea. Of course, extending the driveways, I'll go along with. I think it's needed in some ways, but I hate to lose any green space at all. Thank you.
Thank you for your feedback.
I also have Kevin Yost, who's got his hand raised again.
Kevin?
Yes, Kevin Yost, 1474 Middle Road. Just one question, as mentioned when Mr. Dave from Garden Parker was giving feedback from Supervisor Schultz. Supervisor Schultz was mentioning that cars cannot be parked in the grass. However, next week for 2 days and nights, I can't park on my driveway because my driveway is going to be sprayed by a contractor, and I have to park on the street technically, legally.
No,
I
Kevin,
park on my grass.
I'm going to cut you short. There's not an issue. Our code enforcement knows enough that when your driveway is being sealed or worked on, you can't park in it. We will never ticket somebody for parking in the grass when their driveway is being worked on. Or even if you've got a kid graduation party or something like that and you have some spillover. We're reasonable.
Mainly they would enforce if it was if it was a vehicle without a license plate, mainly.
That doesn't matter whether it's on the grass or in your driveway. Junk vehicles are not allowed on residential properties. But in terms of, again, it's regular parking on the grass. That's the issue. The occasional because of driveways being sealed or, you know, an occasional big event. They're not going to go after you for that. So.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Any others? Go ahead and come on up.
Hello, everybody. I'm Sam DeSalvo. I live in 876 Middle Road. I have a turnaround. And is code enforcement going to actively look for people that park in their turnaround?
No, code enforcement doesn't actively look for any code violations. The vast majority of our code violations come from neighbors basically being adversely affected by their neighbors. And they basically say, hey, Sam always has 40 cars jammed in his driveway and out onto his grass. When we then have to, come take a look at if we have a qualified call, they come take a look at if there is a violation, they'll write it up. Now, again, obviously, if it's something like your driveway's being worked on, or you clearly have a party, if it's a one-time thing or, occasional thing, they're not going to be a problem. If every day you had 40 cars parked in, and obviously I'm using hyperbole, but if every day you had 40 cars, they would write you a notice of violation and ask you to stop. In all those cases, you get a notice of violation. You're given typically, I think, 10 days to correct. If you correct it, nothing happens. It's only if, for people who, again, we have people who have turned their yards into junkyards. Sometimes it's vehicles, unlicensed vehicles. Sometimes they're up on blocks without wheels, lawnmowers, trailers, piles of tires. It's depressing, the lack of consideration some of these property owners have for their neighbors is what it really comes down to. So does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank you.
Sam.
Thank you, Sam.
Yeah.
Any others? Hearing no others, I'm going to call the public hearing for the proposed law to amend the Henrietta Town Code at Chapter 240 to revise driveway regulations closed. Finally, we have a public hearing for proposed local law to amend the Henrietta Town Code at Chapter 295 to address off-site storage for car dealerships. Do we have any comments? So as I mentioned earlier, this one came out of the public hearing we had the other day, and we tried to put in the requirements that we had brought forth. There's a couple other small things it does correct. The way the dealer allowance for dealerships to be on Jefferson Road to be on West Henrietta Road between Jefferson and Lehigh Station was not in the permitted uses section. It was in the prohibited use section. It basically said they're prohibited except for this area. And that created all kinds of issues with regards to other codes, because a lot of times you'll get things like anything that is allowed in this section of code or not expressly forbidden here. We wanted to make it very clear that motor vehicle showrooms are prohibited in all districts except for the commercial B1. So basically it just flat out says they're prohibited in those other zones. We'd already fixed some of them. There was, I think, one that we needed to add. But then what we did is for the commercial district where it is allowed, we basically said that they're only allowed on that section of West Henrietta Road from here to there. So we basically tried to clean that up, just to get rid of any ambiguity, so nobody could somehow get a lawyer in here and argue that the town code does allow it and essentially get a judge ruling on their side. So,
I do have a hand raised if you're ready.
sure, go ahead.
I have Kevin Yost.
Kevin?
Kevin Yost, 1474 Middle Road. I agree with it for the most part that the dealership and storage should be on West Henrietta Road. However, I'd make one exception that the current Valley Hummer and Cadillac dealerships, Winton Road and Goodway Drive. If those dealerships were folded, then they should be allowed to have a car dealership in those two existing buildings too, in case one or both of them should fold. Otherwise, you just have these empty spaces there. I know they can be used for other commercial uses there, like a lot of spaces along the Winton Road commercial corridor have, but I think those two buildings should be allowed to have a dealership should one or both of them fold. Thank you.
Sure, Kevin, just to be clear, those are what are known as pre-existing non-conforming. So that just means they were around prior to the change in town code. They get to continue with their current use, and as long as they continue being a car dealership, they'll be able to stay operating a car dealership. If they ever sell it to be something other than a car dealership, they can't convert back. That's how pre-existing non-conforming works. There's not an issue with them staying car dealerships. It's just like I said, if they ever change, then they can't change back.
Okay, thank you.
So if reading this, if I understand it correctly, they're still going to have to come in for a special use permit.
For the vehicle storage, they would have to come in for a special use, and we specifically talk about the additional factors that the decision is based upon minimizing the visual impact of the storage lot from any public street, minimizing the visual impact on any surrounding properties, especially residential properties, and minimizing the impact on the operation of any surrounding properties. So in addition to the normal conditions that we base a special use permit on, we would look at those three factors as well. And if we feel there is an adverse impact under any one of those, we would then thus be expected to deny. We don't have to deny, but in other words, that's a basis for denial, is because we feel there's an adverse impact in that regards. But again, it does require that they're new cars and trucks only. The dealership has to be legally existing within the town of Henrietta. It can, as I said, for new vehicles for sale, there can be no customer activity and no sales activity taking on place in the storage lot. And again, only upon obtaining a special permit from the town board.
So for me, those things being said, it makes sense not to have these be permanent things that they come and get so they can pass them on to someone else. I mean, the parking lot that I saw today, it's pretty beat up. There are holes in that parking lot that I've driven over in a couple other spots, needs to be taken care of. New cars being stored in that parking lot, I see as an issue with what's going on with theft and things of that nature, and not being very well lit. But that's up to the owners of that business. I understand that. But I would like to see these be temporary things that they get approved for from our board, so that we can actually monitor this and make sure that things aren't getting out of hand.
Well, whether it's
storage,
temporary or permanent, if they are getting out of hand in terms of if they're violating any of those conditions, you can either bring them back in, or if it's obviously a blatant violation, you can send them a notice that you're pulling their special permit because they violated the conditions of that special use permit. Is that correct, Don?
It's going to be a lot harder to pull something once it's granted, I think is his point. And
That's
so,
my point.
One solution to that might be to grant it for to be renewed every year or something like that. That's an option. Some permits are issued that way. They're not permanent.
Right. That just means that you're going to have to hear it every year.
That's fine.
Understand? Okay.
You know, we're actually helping the dealerships out and giving them more storage space. I guess some of the things that I foresee being issues may come up in between us renewing that particular permit, and at least they can be addressed at that time.
I was going to add that, you know, because we just did our first special use permit for the special storage.
Well, we did a temporary one
Temporary.
because it doesn't meet these requirements.
But I was going to say, could we see how they go before we make this a permanent law, or what Don just suggested, make a date, hey, you
So-
gotta come back to us.
To my understanding, even with this code in as it is, there's nothing that prohibits us from making any of the special use permits we grant time-based. Is that correct?
You could usually for special permits, even if it doesn't say in the code, yeah, you could limit it to a certain period of time.
So we can make that standard operating procedure for now, Mike, until such a time as, and there may never come a time when you're comfortable granting them, but you might decide, you know what, we'll do 2 or 5, 3 or 4 or 5,
Yeah.
But certainly in the short term, we could do it that we will grant it for 1 year, you can renew it.
Right.
And the other thing I was going to ask you about, and maybe it's in here and I didn't see it yesterday, was, and you brought it up this afternoon or at the earlier meeting. Should we put something in the law where they are required to have enough room to pull the car hauler in there to load and unload vehicles?
I don't think that should be part of this offsite storage. What I want to do is look at, I forgot what section it is, but vehicles, traffic, and something else. I want to add something to there that prohibits the offloading of vehicles in the street.
Okay, could we?
It doesn't belong in this section because that's not a zoning thing. That's a vehicle traffic portion. So I could look it up real quick if you want, but
Well,
it's another section of town code. Now with car dealerships, again, whether that's part of the code or part of our standard requirement when we're doing site plan, again, having been at a couple of these, they absolutely, when they look at the site plans, they make sure that they do it. Now, one of the things that gets into it that we just have to start looking at putting some more teeth in is if their plan basically said that they were going to have the ability to bring the vehicle or the car carriers in and pull out, and the problem is that they've packed so many cars in there that they can't do that, then we basically need to send them a notice of violation. But again, the bigger issue, as far as I'm concerned, is the loading and unloading in the street where it's unsafe or backing in or out.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. If we,
Right, but my point is that's not a zoning, that is a section of town, that's a action, right? That's a vehicle. So kind of like parking, winter parking or things like that.
so we couldn't have anything in here that their permit could be revoked if they are found unloading cars
I think
in the road.
we have factors in here, things about minimizing the visual impact of the storage lot, minimizing visual impact surrounding properties. We could add in here, something like sufficient ingress and egress for the tractor
Right.
trailers.
I'm good with that on the dealership lots. Unless we want people building a bunch of additional parking lots and paving a bunch of space specifically for this purpose. This was more intended because especially since some of it is to some extent temporary based off of the current supply chain issues, that we would take a look at that. We're more interested in seeing them utilize existing spaces than pave new spaces. So, but to Mike's point, I understand what he was saying now. What Mike would like to see is in here that it basically says a violation of the loading, unloading could result in this being revoked. So what my suggestion is, since we don't have that section of code now, Mike, I'll start working on that. And what we'll do is when we put that section of code in, we can add to A20 violations of whatever that section of code and typically we can pick what that number is or just say repeated violations, or that's up to you to discuss and think what you want in there. But we could basically, once we have that section of code in there, we could absolutely add to A20 that repeated violations of that code could result in the revocation of this special use permit.
So they keep saying that they need the storage because of COVID. So we get a year or 2 years down the road from COVID, are they still going to need the storage?
That I don't know. There, like I said, in talking to a number of folks about the supply chain issues, and it's not just in the automobile industry, there's a number, because of supply chain issues, when you get inventory, you take it, whatever that lot can be for a lot of them. And so they're basically seeing a lot of rubber banding. So they'll have a lot of inventory, and then they'll start to dive down, and they'll actually go below where they normally like to be, but they can't, or it's normally they could trickle in cars. They can't do that right now, is my understanding of it.
I'm just curious if it's going to be a continuation or if we're just looking at a 2 or 3
That I don't know.
issue, and then in 2 or 3 years, we're going to have all these empty parking lots. So I would rather utilize space that exists rather than
I agree.
disturb green space and create parking lots that we may not need in 2 or 3 years.
That I agree with.
Let's keep in mind, that if, like you were saying, they keep bringing up COVID. They were doing it before pre-COVID.
Right.
And so I mean, so when they bring that up, I
Well,
don't,
where
I
were they doing
understand
it?
the supply issue you mentioned.
Right.
But when they say COVID, they had cars parked over here once before, or somebody did
Yeah, it just seems like
in that lot.
these dealers or these businesses are no different than us as individual humans. We buy a whole lot of stuff, and then we need places to put it. And right now, if you can get more inventory, that means you'll probably get more sales because you got more things for people to buy.
One thing on that is, are we considering the fact that this special permit can be issued for a new lot? In other words, they could come in and say, we're going to pave this lot over here, right? It doesn't say in here that it's for a pre-existing parking lot.
No, and again, so to give another example, the one lot off of Brighton Henrietta Town Line Road, that it's someone who is moving their landscaping business here. Their plan is to eventually fill the whole site. What their thought was, in the meantime, they would put a lot in, do some of this temporary parking until the time as they're going to expand. So it would arguably be a new lot, but again, ultimately, their plan would be to put additional storage bins and parking garages as they grow their business, and put in additional parking for some of and storage for their landscaping stuff. And a lot of it's not even necessarily expanding. Some of it, they can only build so much from a capital standpoint. So, I see examples like that, but again, this goes back to why it's a special permit, because rather than try to write the code to deal with that situation, we can look at it and say, okay, this is going to be utilized as his business at some point, so we're not destroying green space. And you can even argue whether it's green space right now because it's filled with junk cars. But there might be other spaces where somebody is taking what's currently a nice green area and looking to pave it, and that it's not going to see some other use in the future. You're just taking away green space. We might decide, you know what, that's not a good use, and deny it.
But this isn't meant to limit it to pre-existing parking lots, correct?
It is not.
Okay. Just want to make sure we all understood that.
Wow.
But again,
Never thought of that, Don.
I'm kind of, I don't want to see them paving stuff over just to make a parking lot. And I think
we could add that as a factor if we so desired. Is that one of the other factors to consider is loss of green space. Although I think, is that part of a standard?
We could add that in
special
there,
use
yeah.
permit? Okay.
I think that's okay to add in if we want to put something in there about that.
Probably a good idea. I think back to some of the things when we were on the zoning board together, Don, and as far as signage. And they looked at electronic signage as like a bad thing. It was going to distract drivers, it was gonna do this, it was gonna, well, now all we get is electronic signage. So, you know, by having something in a permit, special permit with a temporary thing, we can look at and see if it makes sense to extend it to permit. You know, it gives you time to do that.
Well, so like I said, you get into some of the question as to whether there is an authority to be granting these temporary permits today. This makes it clear we are.
Right.
And again, we have the ability for all of them right now to put a time limit on them. So we can basically until we're comfortable, and again, we may decide, you know what, we always want it to be, but the point is, while we're granting these, we can put a time limit so that they expire. And so that takes care of that
Yeah.
temporary until we're comfortable.
I feel more comfortable with that.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's good as a practice, but I think it would not be a bad thing to include it in the code if possible, because future boards will be wondering what our thinking was on this particular matter, and that will make it clear.
Our town clerks can share this discussion.
Yeah, I've been taking notes on this. Sounds like we may be looking at revising this a little bit. And if that's the case,
Okay.
I've got some notes here we can do that with.
So then the question is, what do we want to do with the Van Bortle? Do we put them off to the 30th, understanding that their cars parked there today? Do we want to do the temporary thing like we had done with Marketplace for now? And then they can come back later when the code is changed. I don't know if someone from Van Bortle or the Daytona Partners one is around still.
Yes, Dan McDonald.
Do you have a preference of those two routes?
Well, again, we anticipated, certain conditions with respect to the special use permit. In particular, the fire access lanes. If there are other conditions, including a time limit, if that's something that the town board is interested in, our primary concern is we'd like to have these special use permit issued. We do have Van Bortle cars in storage on the lot. And if the town board, could issue a special use permit with a time frame in it, with other appropriate conditions, we would certainly at least be in a position to have that current usage permitted.
So yeah, I think you have a couple options here. One is grant another temporary situation. Two is, have an understanding that we're not going to enforce against these guys over the next month while we wrap up this law. Three is we could theoretically make these revisions and adopt this law tonight and then deal with this application.
I haven't read the email that we got. I still have some questions, but I guess we got something.
I can read that.
So you said number two would be, hey, we don't go after them until we pass it.
Yeah.
That was the number two.
Yeah.
Right. So let me just read the email while you're thinking about that, Mike. So it basically says Ruth from Van Bortle called and she requested the town board give them a list of guidelines to follow for the special use permit approval, and they will park their cars within that guideline. She says she doesn't want to put a number on it right now because she doesn't know how many cars can fit in that lot because they haven't had to test it yet. And my screen just went. And she would like to have the flexibility to ebb and flow as needed with the number of cars. She stressed multiple times that they're willing to comply, and we just need to give them the guidelines, and they will follow them.
So the number of cars still hasn't been answered.
No, because again, I think the issue is they need to take a look at You know, the thing is that those back parking lots are not currently striped.
They're not striped. They're in tough shape. It's hard to get around the west side of that lot.
Right.
It is narrow to come down the north side. I should say the south side is it's hard to get around that way. And the north side is very narrow getting back there.
In terms of the paving, to be clear, our ability to force someone to pave.
I know it
you're
doesn't
not
matter.
asking, but I'm just saying it's when it creates a public hazard, since it's their vehicles, they're the ones who put in their own
Yep, it's
vehicles.
their
at risk.
responsibility.
It's their
The
responsibility.
cars get robbed,
Like I
it's their
said,
responsibility.
The difference is, like, for instance, what was going on over at the entrance to the old Suburban Plaza, that you had residents driving down there, customers driving down there, and it was creating problems for their cars. So in that case, we can intervene. But when it's a quote unquote, the private parking lot and the public is not in danger, that's on them. So I know you understood that. I just wanted to.
Yeah,
reiterate.
I just think that to know how many cars are gonna put there or to have a little bit more.
Okay, so why don't we do this? Why don't we take option 3, the door that Carol Merrill is standing in front of, for all of those of you old enough. And basically, so what we're gonna do is we will revise the code. We'll vote on it next meeting. And then what we'll do is, in the meantime, we will ask them to do a determination as to how many cars they expect to put in that lot.
That's a gauge of like this much, but no more than this much.
Yeah.
As long as we know that it's, maybe we're gonna put 75 cars there, but it might be as much as 125 cars, which I know probably the number's strange that I don't.
Right, no, that's fine. So,
But if there's a gauge there that we have an idea.
right.
Right.
Rather than
Sure.
all of a sudden there's 500 cars, which I think they would do,
Right.
but you know what I'm saying?
Oh,
Yes.
I love hyperbole, so you don't have to explain it to me.
Well,
And you're drifting from your mic.
Sorry.
I mean, they say they got 10 acres, but
Sorry.
it's really a small parking lot, to be quite honest, in the
It's
back.
Just to kind of know how tight it's going to be or have an
Sure.
idea would be very helpful.
There is a storage lot over on Stone Road, and at times, when I say Stone Road, I'm sorry, in Greece.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Let's say, not that I'm
Yeah,
aware.
no,
Right.
and excuse me, I'm sorry. And it was an old car dealership. They moved from there to a different location, but they still use that for storage. And there, at times, you cannot even walk in between. I mean, they got them parked. I don't,
Parks so tight.
the person that pulls them in and out of there must weigh 90 pounds because you can't even go through the aisles or in between them. So it's very, I haven't been over there in a couple of years, but it's
Maybe they all have to have moon roofs.
very, very difficult to get in there. And I didn't know how they planned on storing them here, if they like that or not. But one other question I did have, and if I understand this correctly, it's only if the dealership has the dealership in Henrietta. So
Correct.
if a dealership has a Ford dealership, let's say in Cannon.
I'll use an example. There's a Dorschel truck dealership in Rush.
Right.
Just down the street. They could not
Thank
store them in Henrietta.
Thank you.
I'll circulate the comments I heard tonight for
Great.
us to have a look at.
Any other feedback, either in person or online, for this public hearing? I'm going to hold the public hearing open since we're going to represent we'll make the modifications and represent the law at the June 30th meeting. That concludes our public hearings presentations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will just note that if you could follow, you've heard us talk about the types of stuff that's coming, so try to follow that as best you can. And again, if you can work with Subaru to try to come up with an estimate, both what their expected normal occupancy is and what the maximum occupancy would be.
We'll talk with Van Bortle Subaru on the several issues that have been discussed tonight.
Okay, thank you very much. You have a
Okay,
good-
thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. Can I get my first resolution?
Supervisor Schultz, fellow board members, I have resolution 12-150, 2021, to authorize bills payable for June 9th, 2021.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford.
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor, fellow town board members, I have resolution 12-151, 2021 to designate 1063 Erie Station Road as a historic site.
Seconded.
So obviously we had a lot of discussion at the public hearing. Is there any further discussion before we go to vote? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford. Councilmember Safranek.
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Now have a historic house. Well, you've always had a historic house.
Now you officially have a historic.
That's right.
house. All right, so I know it's me next, and I went into the wrong thing, so I have like a million pictures I'm going through to get to my thing.
You want to read mine?
Can I just read what's here? Supervisor Schultz and fellow board members, I have resolution number 12-152, 2021 to accept the findings of facts for the final supplemental generic environmental impact statement for incentive zoning and solar. Is that okay?
It's
To issue findings relatives to seeker for incentive zoning and solar codes.
There you go.
Got it. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Second.
It's happened to all of us. I think, certainly me.
Yes.
Any
And
discussion?
me,
Any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford. Oh, I almost skipped you. Councilmember Stafford.
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek. Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Mr. Supervisor and fellow board members, I have resolution 12-153, 2021 to call for a public hearing for a local law to implement incentive zoning in the town of Henrietta.
Second. Any discussion? I will say that we had some discussions with potential developments already about some of the drag along infrastructure. So again, I see that I suspect this will be embraced and will bring residents some much needed infrastructure where it would have otherwise been too costly for them to do it through a extension. So, and I further expect there to be additional benefits in terms of things like reuse of older buildings. So, any further discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford.
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek.
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye. Me and fellow board members. Sorry, couldn't resist. I have resolution 12-154, 2021 to approve the conveyance of open space for town land from the Forest View subdivision.
Second.
So there will be three of these in total. The first one is for the parkland. And it's basically 28.6 roughly acres of open space. Any questions?
Not on this one. but-
Okay, we'll get to each one separate. I just wanted to make clear which one we're talking about. At this point, one of the things that this will allow us to do, there have been a couple actions where we wanted to do some parkland alienation. That becomes much easier when you acquire new land. The parkland alienation is actually small. So for instance, one of the things we're looking at, a number of the recreational sports folks want to put up storage facilities at our town parks. That's not exactly a proper use of town park, so we want to take a small portion of that town park, turn it into town land instead of town park. That requires alienation.
Okay.
There's also at the Martin Road Southern Park. Now, it's not developed yet, but when it was accepted, it was clearly designated parkland. It goes right to the backyard of a resident's property. And that is problematic right now while it is being farmed, and it will be problematic when it is parked. They have offered to purchase a buffer. And again, I explained to them, we can't do that unless we're able to alienate the parkland. It's not a huge amount of land we'd be losing, but I think it's the right thing to do because again, nobody wants a park right up to their essentially back windows. What it was is it's one of the, so that land was originally, I believe it was Kiribati Farm. This was one of the homes that they had sectioned off for their kids. And one of the things that often happened when the farmers did that, they drew the property lines tight to the house because it was all the family farm. Well, that was great when it was the family farm. Now that it is, you know, not all in the family, so to speak, it's created issues. So there's a couple of those that we'd be looking at. So you've probably seen those later in the summer. But just wanted to let people know, because again, this is the first parkland we've had donated in a while. So
Mr. Supervisor, what would you think would be the acreage that we would alienate for the storage?
it'd be measured in square feet.
Okay.
It would just be a small portion.
So we're not taking an acre.
Oh, no, no, no.
Okay.
We're not even the size of this room.
Okay.
But again, to be proper, the issue is if it's town land, then, or if it's parkland, then it has to be available for everybody to store there, which kind of defeats the purpose of these athletic associations being able to store their equipment there. And they're the ones that, you know, run like the soccer league, the lacrosse league. RHAA has a slightly different arrangement because it's not actually parkland. But if we ever do acquire that land from the school and turn it into a park, we would have to do, when we do that, we would carve out the portion for the storage.
Okay.
And oh, by the way, we already do that. So that what the barn that stores our equipment and such, that portion there next to the DPW is on land that's carved out from the park.
Okay.
So this has been done before. We're just cleaning it up so that we can accommodate it in a few of the other parks.
But it would be easier to do that on the front end. In other words, not take a bunch of land and as a park dedication and then later have to alienate it.
No, no, no. I agree. We're not doing that now. I'm just saying from everything I've read from a parkland alienation, the other ones that were alienated, they basically want to say, well, did you increase your park? In other words, they don't like to see the amount of acreage parkland go down.
Okay.
And again, we're not talking acreage, we're talking hundreds of feet. The point is, I just bring this up because now that we've added some, we can, when we go for that parkland alienation, which has to go to the parks, New York State Parks Department, and then ultimately to the New York State Legislature, it's good to have in there that we just increased the amount of acreage of our parks. I agree, Don, if and when, like the RHA, if we were to take that over, we would carve it out first.
Right.
And just not, there'd be a portion that would be designated town land, the rest would be the town park.
Right.
But yeah, looking forward, we're gonna keep an eye out for that. Because, you know, again, same thing, if we activate the southern, not activate, but if we develop the southern portion of Martin Road Park, I suspect we're gonna wanna see the same thing. So I would look ahead, lay it out and figure out where would we wanna have athletic field storage, because again, it primarily, the expected use for that would be athletic fields. So.
So the fact that we are accepting dedication of this parkland is not going to negatively impact the alienation of.
No, it actually positively impacts it. That's what I was saying. The reason I haven't done those applications yet is one of the first things they ask is, will the result be less parkland than you had a year before?
I see.
Because we're adding 28.6 acres and we're getting rid of 0.01 acres, we're obviously on the positive.
Mhm.
So again, it really has nothing to do with our acceptance of this. I'm just bringing it up now because I just wanted you guys to know what's coming.
Okay, great.
Any comments on this particular park? Anything online? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford, Councilmember Safranik, Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Fellow board members, I have resolution 12-155, 2021 to accept the dedication of conservation easement areas for the Forest View subdivision.
Second.
So this one is for the conservation easements that are across the edge parcels. Some are in some of the newly created parcels in the buffer between the homes and the farm. And then some are in the portion that is going to be ceded to the neighbors on Ward Hill Road. Again, all of this land is its buffer space. And as part of the clustering, they pulled the homes together, but we added this extra buffering in which nothing can be built. And so that's what these easements are about. Now, it's much easier to do the easements first and then transfer the land. Rob, I think you saw the update. I don't know if you were in on the subsequent one from.
I saw something from Peter, but I don't
Peter
know if I saw
Barge, yeah.
anything else.
Yeah, so basically there is an update that they do have they're finalizing the 3 conveyances, but those maps had to wait till these easements were on them.
Okay, very
And
good.
so basically they'll add the easements to the survey maps and then they will execute the conveyance and file it. So again, there are 4 neighbors on Ward Hill Road. 3 of the 4 elected to take the property. The 4th one did not. However, his neighbor said, well, if he's not going to take it, I will. And so
they'll be very happy to hear that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this one? In this easement, so it's essentially on a portion of the yard. They can have picnic tables, they could have gardens, they could have, trees, anything like that. They can't have physical structures. So they can't have, it couldn't be a swimming pool. They couldn't have a shed. If it was something that was freestanding, like a pop-up tent, sure. But it can't be anything that's becomes
Right.
real property.
Chicken coop.
Chick- So.
Always Millie with the chickens.
I do have a hand raised if you're ready.
Sure.
Uh,
This is Kevin Yost.
Kevin Yost, 1474 Meadow Road. I just want to ask a question. Is this for sale subdivision and soon to be adjoining park on or along Ward Hill Road and on the north side or the south side, and we're in relation to East Henrietta or Pinnacle Roads?
It's on the south side. It's between East Henrietta and Pinnacle. Right? Yep. And then
I assume it's closer to Pinnacle.
the entrance to the subdivision is directly across from Branch Brook. If you drive out, you'll see it. The houses are starting to go in.
Closer to East Henrietta.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe a quarter to a third of the way. Like I said, it's right across from Branch Brook, if you know where that is. Log Branch.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
I assume that the park is to the south.
The park is further south and actually connects to land the town already owns that straddles the Lehigh Valley Trail. So the plan is, this park is primarily what is often referred to as a passive park, meaning it's not going to be athletic fields. There's, maybe a picnic pavilion and restroom, but mostly there's going to be a bunch of trails that interconnect to the Lehigh Valley Trail. So it'll be a good trailhead and a place to from there. There might be what I'll call neighborhood level play set. There's nothing massive like you see at Memorial Park, but something like you used to see at some of the neighborhood playgrounds like Kenwick, Bell Manor, those type of parks.
Yeah, those Kennewick and Bellman are strictly grass, pretty much, not much different than green belts, except that they are dedicated parks and named. And I assume that this is kind of along the Lehigh Trail southwest of Cedar Swamp, southeast of Cedar Swamp, rather.
To the south of this land, you start to get into the swampy area. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor, fellow town board members, I have Resolution 12-156, 2021, to accept an agricultural conservation easement for the Forest View subdivision.
Seconded.
So we did reach out to the Genesee Land Trust to see if they would be willing to be an additional grantee. The representative who I work with, Lorna, she was very much interested in that, but she can't speak for her board. It has to pass by board resolution. She suspects they will be interested, but so it's written right now with just us as the grantee. If they come on board, Don will modify it to include them as the grantee. From a enforcement standpoint and all that, it's still the town. The difference is it's additional protection to keep it farmland because in theory, a future town board could decide, you know what, I'm going to let them build there anyway. Now with two grantees, they would need both the approval of the town board and the Genesee Land Trust in order to get that approval. If either one of them say no, then they can't build. So we felt this was important, both from a farmland protection standpoint, which obviously was a big part of our comprehensive land use update, but as also to a promise to the residents in the area, because one of the things that, for lack of a better way to put it, sold the development was that we were going to preserve 55 acres of farmland and almost 30 acres of town land. Again, that town land, the town board can't change it without going through parkland alienation. So in both of those, they are heavily protected. We didn't bother to do that as much for the little strip lands because, again, especially for the stuff that's effectively the buffer for the folks on Ward Hill, they're not going to want to see something built there. But for these two large ones, both the park with parkland alienation and the farmland protection with this agricultural easement, we felt it was important to have that added protection for the neighbors. So, so basically what'll happen is this one we won't fully sign until we get that answer from Genesee Land Trust, and basically send that around. When we do, obviously if something, because of Genesee Land Trust, greatly changes the form of the agricultural easement from what was presented to you guys, we would then put it up for resolution again. If it is non-material changes, that, in other words, it doesn't change the intent as we're approving here, then it would just be based off of Don's approval. I don't expect any changes, any material changes. Like I said, if there may be just a few things in language, because I know one of the questions Genesee Land Trust had was they wanted to make sure that with us bringing them on, they weren't responsible for enforcement.
Gotcha.
So, any other questions on that?
Nope, you answered that.
And somebody had asked, I don't remember whether it was at workshop or after workshop, someone had asked about the securing of that. Basically, the developer essentially purchased the right to put this easement from the property owner. For what amount, I don't know. I don't care. As long as the property owner, Larkin, and the developer agreed to it, that's their business. Any other questions? Anything online? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford.
Aye.
Councilmember Safranik,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz and fellow board members, I have resolution number 12-157, 2021, to authorize the supervisor to sign the Marketplace Senior Housing Pilot Agreement.
Second.
Any discussion?
Just once again, very happy to see that we're getting some affordable senior housing in Henrietta.
Agreed.
And I know you worked worked hard on that to get it, so I think it's very good.
Any other discussion? Anything online? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Councilmember Safranik,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor and fellow board members, I have resolution 12-158, 2021, to provide some relief from rental registry fees for those rental properties unable to collect rent during the coronavirus pandemic.
Second. So again, we did have someone who has a rental property who was unable to collect rent. And in this case, they had no tenants. I guess they normally rent to college students, and since the college student was attending virtually, they didn't have a tenant. That's the only one I've heard so far, but I didn't want to do something on a one-off standpoint and just deal with that one person. I wanted to have something so that all of them coming in were treating equally and fairly. So
Good idea.
that was the basis behind this.
Are they going to have to sign something that says that they didn't get any relief from the state or federal government on their rent?
We can make that a requirement, yes.
Thank you.
So to Councilman Stafford's point, there are some state and federal programs by which if they were unable to collect, let me take a step back, you might be aware, they basically put a moratorium on evictions, even if people weren't paying their rents. There has now been some relief that essentially the government will pay some of those back rents. So the point is, whereas a landlord may not have been able to collect rent because the person was unpaid and they weren't able to evict, if they get reimbursed from the government, then and the opinion or the idea behind this is they are not out that rent, they just got it from a different source, and therefore it wouldn't apply here. So with that said, at the end of the day, it's $50 if someone signs it and then goes and collects it later.
Right.
Shame on them.
Yes. Okay.
Any other comments, questions? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Safranik,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye. Yeah, one of the things with Zoom is if you start speaking before they finish speaking, they often can't hear you. Fellow board members, I have resolution 12-159, 2021 to authorize environmental analysis professional services from Labella to examine the Good Shepherd Church and Burger Farmhouse.
Second.
So as mentioned at Monday's meeting, there was a phase one done recently. Don and I spoke and we decided because it's more than a year old, to protect the town in future, we're gonna have them update it. We don't expect there to be anything. The only thing that the school stored in there during that time was school desks and chairs. there better not be any contamination leaking from those school tester chairs, or my kids are in trouble.
I don't know, that bubble gum on the bottom?
Yeah, there might be bubble gum. So, but like I said, from a safety standpoint, God forbid something happens way down the road, we're better have done the due diligence. We don't want somebody to come in and say, well, your phase one was more than a year old, so you didn't do your due diligence. So that's all this is about. It's only $1,500. Normally I'd be able to prove that. The reason it's here is because it's to the same company and for the same property as a few other things, and the aggregate of those three services is over $8,000. So we're just bringing, because we did the other ones here, you can see the aggregate amount is 13 grand. We're just updating that aggregate number. So any questions, comments?
No.
Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford, Councilmember Safranek, Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Fellow board members, I have Resolution 12-160, 2021, to call for a public hearing on the modification of the Town Code Section 234-11 with respect to the solid waste and residential refuge collection map.
Second.
So again, the plan is to modify the code so that during this time when we only have 3 licensed collectors, we don't have to spend the time updating a map that isn't necessary. Excuse me, the map was used back in the day when we had 6 or 7 licensed collectors to keep it to a maximum of 3 per neighborhood, 3 days per neighborhood. Since we only have 3 collectors, what we did is instead said when there are 3 or fewer collectors, each collector must collect their refuge in a neighborhood on the same day. And we did add the update in parentheses. It says solid waste or recyclables when it says that it has to be, you know, the refuse collection, because that was brought up, I think, on Monday. That's what we're putting forth. Any comments, questions, including online? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor, fellow town board members, I have Resolution 12-161, 2021, to authorize creation of an ad hoc committee to guide the development of sustainability efforts in Henrietta.
Seconded.
So thank you to everybody who volunteered. We actually had more volunteers than we could fit. I had hoped to contact the individuals who didn't fit. But my schedule the last few days has been crazy and I never got a chance to do it. Basically what it came down to is we had a number of people who were from a similar committee or similar backgrounds. And so we basically were trying to have a broad range of skill sets so that we had, you know, better input. Anyone who applied and didn't get accepted, by all means, show up at if you wish, you can show up at the meetings. We're happy to have additional people working, and there may be efforts that, you know, you might want to help on a specific effort. But, you know, again, we had, I think it was 10 applicants and 7 positions. So it was some tough decisions, but, you know, again, our goal was to get a range of skill sets. So that's how we got to where we're at.
I do have a hand raised.
Great.
This is Kevin Yost.
Yes, Kevin Yost, 1474 Middle Road. I know there is a group called Color Henrietta Green. I attended their first meeting as was publicized on one of the library's e-newsletters. I would hope that maybe some of the membership would have come from that group and that maybe they'll hash out some of the ideas that have been brought up by that group. I haven't known of any meetings of Color Henry Green since that first meeting. I haven't gotten any emails to that effect or anything.
So Kevin, two of the founders of Color Henrietta Green are on the sustainability board. There were, I think, a total of 4 Color Henrietta Green members who applied. And again, basically, I decided, and having worked with 2 of the individuals when we were pursuing a grant previously, those founders, co-founders, and Color Henrietta Green members did put on, and then, like I said, there were a couple others. We decided to fill in with people with some, specifically, we were looking for some grant writing ability. So we got a couple people with strong grant writing ability. We have a couple people with some strong scientific backgrounds. So that's kind of how we flex it out. But yeah, there's strong representation from Color Henrietta Green.
Actually, and there was a group that preceded Color Henrietta Green. Unfortunately, went by the wayside in the mid to late 2000s. Henrietta Pride, and it was chaired by Lori Bercolo, who's co-owner with her husband of a Bercolo Tree and Landscape here in town, and I believe they're Henrietta residents as well. And then Mike Gilson was involved in that when he was a councilman, and as was Councilwoman Janet Zink back then too.
Great. Thank you very much. Any other comments? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz and fellow board members, I have resolution number 12-162, 2021, to authorize creation of an ad hoc committee to guide the development of the Good Shepherd Church and Burger Farmhouse properties.
Second.
So again, same thing. We had, in this case, 8 applicants for 7 positions. We had 3 individuals from Raft. The manager, Jody Day, I selected, and then basically spoke with her to get a better understanding of the skill sets of the other 2. So again, to try to find where there was a broader range of skill sets. So unfortunately, I haven't had the chance to talk to the person who wasn't accepted. But again, I suspect her interest is in developing out the Raft site at the Burger Farmhouse. So I will encourage her when we're working on that she be involved in that. Because again, the more input, the better. But like I said, we had 8 people for 7 positions. So, and again, thank you to everybody who applied for both, as well as the council members, Rob Barley for sustainability, Lisa Bolsner for Good Shepherd, who are going to act as liaisons for these committees. Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Sorry about that. Mr. Supervisor and fellow board members, I have resolution 12-163, 2021, to accept the Monroe County Stormwater Coalition Joint Annual Report.
Second. Any questions, comments? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye. Fellow board members, I have resolution 12-164, 2021, to authorize funds for increased costs to the Cabin Road Culvert Project to install additional concrete curbing.
Second.
So I'll point out, this is not a cost overrun. Basically, in talking with Shelley, the manager for the senior center, there was a concern that they actually have today where traffic from town hall comes through the parking lots for the senior center, and especially the concern is the parking lots that are close to the building. And so what we decided to do is we're rerouting the road from town hall over closer to the bridge, and then we're putting in a curbed island so that people won't cut diagonally through the parking lot and endanger, especially people coming in right now for grab and go lunches and things like that. We had looked, concrete services are hard to come by right now. And so Craig reached out to CP Ward, and they were able to add it to the work that they were doing. And so that's why we're doing it as a change order. And then Tim Lessing and his team got on it and told them we need it yesterday so that we get it paved and everything in place in time for the 4th of July. So
Great job, Craig.
any other questions, comments? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolzner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
All right.
Supervisor Schultz and fellow board members, I have resolution 12-165, 2021, to authorize Whitney East Inc. to install a concrete sidewalk and patio.
Second.
So again, additional work, the concrete sidewalk is going from the sidewalk on the south side. I often look at the map upside down. On the south side of Minerva Campbell Road, across from the rec center, out to the new footbridge. This was the footbridge that used to be located where the new culvert is now located. And then they are also adding sidewalk to the patio outside the 3-season room for the senior center. We'd had a quote from CP Ward. Craig thought we could do better. He and Mike Catalano went out and we were able to get a better price. So one of the things that we do have in here, sometimes from an availability standpoint, it'll change. So we actually have it approved for the one that is, it's $10 more, but it's got better availability. Obviously, if the lower one comes available sooner, great. But like I said, the way we've approved this is for the 80/60 one because of availability. Okay. Otherwise, we would have to wait till September to pour that. So
worth the $10.
It's worth the $10.
Yep.
Exactly. Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolzner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor, fellow town board members, I have resolution 12-166, 2021. Whereas Keith and Marlene Baker have donated $200 to the Henrietta Public Library, and whereas a check in the amount of $200 was received by the library director, therefore be it resolved that the Henrietta Town Board acknowledges the donation and thanks Keith and Marlene Baker for their generosity.
Seconded.
Any discussion?
I want to thank Keith and Marlene. I know them. They're good people. They like motorcycles and bicycling. But it's nice to see another person give to the library. It's always nice to see.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
Any further discussion? Anything online? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolzner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz and fellow board members, I have resolution number 12-167, 2021, to close out the capital project fund for the pre-library site work and return the balance of the funds to the general fund.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford.
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor and fellow board members, I have resolution 12-168, 2021 to return interest earned in the 2020 from the capital project fund to the general fund.
Second. Any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye. Fellow board members, I have resolution 12-169, 2021 to authorize the supervisor to sign a confidential lawsuit settlement.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Fellow board members, I have resolution 12-170, 2021 to make appropriate adjustments per the 2021 adopted budget and additional funding to 2021 from New York State.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor, fellow town board members, I have resolution 12-171, 2021 to hire personnel.
Seconded.
Any questions? Any comments? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz and fellow board members, I have resolution 12-172, 2021 to call for a public hearing to update the town of Henrietta comprehensive plan.
Second.
So this is to add the finding statement that we just approved tonight to the comprehensive plan that we had approved back in 2019. Again, what we just completed with the supplemental GEIS, it was supplemental to the GEIS for this particular comprehensive plan update. We wanted to put it all together so that it's one-stop shopping, so to speak, when people want to find out what we did during that comprehensive land use update. Any other questions? Any comments? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor and fellow board members, I have resolution 12-173, 2021 to adopt local law number 5 of 2021 to amend the Henrietta Town Code at chapter 240 to revise driveway regulations.
Second. So again, I know we had comment from a resident regarding he would like to see some peel back of some of the restrictions that were put in place a number of years ago. That wasn't the intent of this particular update to these regulations. We can certainly take a look at that in the future, but I would prefer not to muddy the waters on this particular one with doing that peel back. We certainly couldn't do it today because that's a significant enough change that would require it to go. So there's nothing that prevents us from doing a further update to chapter 240 if we so desire to do that peel back. But for right now, the prohibition against parking in the extensions and turnarounds, and that's, again, that's standard or primary parking. So if you've got, like I said, if you've got a event going on and you've got more cars, you got a bunch of friends over, that's not what we're talking about. We're just talking about the continual parking in those spaces. The intention is this doesn't change that from what it was previously. It just adds the ability to more readily put in the turnarounds without essentially giving a variance to create these super wide driveways, which is the way it's done today. As well as the other thing that was included in here is we relaxed it. In the past, driveways had to be paved with either asphalt or concrete. For historic properties or properties in the rural residential districts, we also allow them to pave it with stone. And I know that sounds like a kind of an oxymoron, but that's actually how it's referred to. It's paved in stone. And so, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to know if someone did have, a need for a recreational vehicle or something along those lines, would there be a possibility of a special use permit or something along those lines for them?
They don't actually need a special use permit. If they're building a compliant extension, they can park the recreational vehicle there. That's what the extensions are for, are things like recreational vehicles, boats, trailers, four-wheelers, things like that. And again, we did add the ability in the past, the extension could only be alongside the garage. We did allow it to go down past the garage into the backyard to like an auxiliary structure. So let's say it's a barn or a shed where they might be storing those auxiliary vehicles out of the view of thieves, as one of the things was brought up. This does allow for those extensions to go there. So it actually makes it actually provides more flexibility over the existing code than less. But like I said, I'm not ready to take on the issue of lifting the primary parking restrictions that were put in. My belief, again, I'd have to go back and read it, but my belief is it was done because of there was a huge uproar over the growth of the rental properties throughout town, especially the northwest portion of town, but they're making it to most sections of town these days. And, so we'd have to take a look at how could we relax some of the restrictions as requested by the resident while not adversely affecting our ability to go after the people who create issues for their neighbors with the massive parking lots.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Mr. Pierce for coming in and sharing information with us about relaxing some of those things, something that we will take a look at and talk about. So thanks for coming in. Yep.
Yeah, and I just see these revisions is making it a little better for the residents as a step towards some of these things. So thank you.
Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye. So fellow board members, I am going to pull resolution 12-174 since we decided we are going to make changes to the offsite storage law and bring it forth at the next meeting, which is on June 30th. And that, let me make sure, yep, that concludes our resolutions. Do we have any public discussions? Yep.
Good evening, Kevin Wilson, Director of Building Fire Prevention. I just want to bring to the board's attention, we had a house fire over the weekend, very substantial damage. Town Fire Marshal Richard Harrod brought to my attention that he's got some very major concerns with public safety. And he just wanted to, again, bring it to your attention that he's going to pursue having this house raised sooner than later. We haven't had any real pushback or actually conversation with the property owners yet. We haven't gotten a hold of the insurance adjusters. So just want to bring it to your attention that, we may, if it doesn't go smoothly, we may bring it back to the board for resolution to have it taken down sooner than later.
Okay.
It just kind of came up this afternoon, so that's why I'm brought it in late.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where did that
And before
happen?
you go, has there been any update on the Stone Road fire?
Actually, Rich is meeting the adjuster Friday to go
Okay.
through that to get their findings.
Okay.
Yeah.
There was a fire sometime back on Stone Road, significant damage, and its question as to, gets in the argument, do they repair it or raise it? But I just wasn't sure if there was and this particular structure was owned by a convicted sexual offender, so that's why it's been vacant, is because he's been in jail.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a strange one, but I just was curious if there was an update.
Yeah, I went by there last week to check to see if it'd been leveled or not. And not yet.
The good news is the fire over the weekend, there was no injuries, major injuries,
Good.
other
That's
than
good
they
to hear.
cannot find the house cat, but.
And I know there's something, I saw something, I don't know if it was Henrietta Highlights or something, that they're doing a collection for the family.
Yeah. Yep.
Thank you, Lisa.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks,
Kevin.
Kev.
Thanks, Kevin.
I do have a hand raised.
Okay,
This is Kevin Yost.
Yes, Kevin Yost, 1474 Middle Road. Good evening again. It was discussed earlier, the new Forest Creek, whatever, park that's going to be off Ward Hill Road and Pinnacle Road, and then this discussion about the future of the old good 1911 Good Shepherd and neighboring Burger House properties. I know there was discussion a few years ago about possibly the town acquiring land for possible park, or maybe something similar to this, Forest Creek along Castle Road. And then there was discussion about acquiring the Tinker North house and surrounding yard last year. I wonder what's the status of those right now.
the status is we're waiting to find out what happens with ARPA money and other, as well as what happens with the sales tax, mortgage tax for this year. Because the reason those were put on hold very simply was the decline in revenue due to the pandemic. So the two properties, it's the on Castle Road, there's a conservancy that land was donated to the Genesee Land Trust. And the idea was there was an interest in turning that into a nature park. So it would be trails through the property. And that's it. So basically parking lot, we were talking maybe a rest area. We'd rather people use the rest area than use nature. The Genesee Land Trust doesn't have the ability to do that. So the idea was we would buy the land from them. And one of the things that we talked about, and they agreed, now again, it would, I suspect, require approval, but that any funds we paid for that park, for that land, then only be used for the acquisition of development rights within the town of Henrietta. So if you're not familiar with the Genesee Land Trust, one of the things they do is they purchase development rights, essentially similar to what just happened with the Larkin Farm on Ward Hill. They basically paid to put a conservation easement on the property so that it stays open land, but they have limited funds. And so this would provide them funds to do that. So I sort of see it as essentially we get double the bang for the buck in that we acquire a new park as well as preserve additional open space within the town. So that was the one mentioned on Castle Road. The other one, we were approached by the owners of one of the Tinker, or one of the, I guess it was Aldridge relatives, north of Tinker Park. They were looking to sell. We had talked to them about potentially purchasing it, and then again, the bottom fell out on the revenues. I do not know, Kevin, whether they've sold that yet or not. So I don't know whether that one's going to still be available at a time when we do have the money available to potentially purchase it. The idea there is we would use, I think we were talking about potentially moving the historian offices and museum over there to create more space for the historian and her displays. But again, that one was kind of put on hold because of what's going on with the pandemic. And I don't know whether the property owners did or did not sell it since they made that offer. Any other public discussion?
As everyone here is probably aware, this is Pride Month, and the Rochester area historically celebrates Pride Week in July. For the past couple of years, the town has held a flag raising event that has been energetically organized by members of the Henrietta LGBTQ community. So I know that we've had some offline conversations about upcoming Pride event. I think that one of the things that I would like us to consider is how we can maybe put this reoccurring on our calendar, so that as energetic members of the community change and different things happen within, that it doesn't fall off of the radar and awareness of the board. I do think it is really important and significant to recognize and embrace all members of our community, and to have that as a symbol that we are a welcoming community.
Great. Right now, we're tentatively looking at, so I believe the Rochester Pride Week is the July 10th to the 18th.
Sounds right.
And that Saturday is what we're currently looking to potentially schedule the flag raising. We're trying to get confirmation from some key participants to make sure they'll all be able to attend. The plan will be to have the resolution on the agenda for the 30th. One of the things I will want to do is put the, as you refer to them, the enthusiastic organizers in touch with the Parks Department. One of the challenges is that one of our biggest summer events is 6 days before that. That doesn't mean that we can't get that done, but I do think it will always be beneficial to have some community participation in helping line up the events. Again, this was brought up. We were aware it was coming. But I agree, it isn't, shall we say, standard operating procedure yet. So the Parks and Rec Department is where that really should reside from a standard operating procedure standpoint. So
Yes.
I'll reach out to them, again, being cognizant of the amount of work that goes into the July 4th so that we don't overburden. But there's certainly other, Christmas and New Year's are a week apart. So, we can do it, but you also look at the size of the events and what they're adjacent to. But as I said, I think we can do that, but I think it would always be helpful if there was community involvement as well. So.
Yes, I think it's particularly important to include members of, voices from the Henrietta LGBTQ community, and hopefully members of the Henrietta youth who particularly feel affiliation with that membership there.
Great. Thank you. Any other discussion items? Board or public?
I do have a hand raised.
Okay.
Oh, I have two hands raised, actually. But first up is Catherine Nuss.
Catherine?
I'm here, Catherine Nuss, 32 New Tudor Road. And a couple things I would like to, I guess I'm trying to discourage some of these developmental properties. And a couple of things I'd like the board to think about. Number one, any new buildings in Henrietta that are built have an alternative source of energy or power for the building. Should we have any more storms and things like that for the protection of our people? Either solar with the new batteries and so on and so forth, or the generic stuff to run your house if there's a storm or like that. And I think if we start thinking of putting in some of these things, looking forward to the future, it would help. And if the town did it to our own buildings, it would also help. That's one thing. Another thing is the lot size north of the thruway, if it could be increased. It would stop some of these multiple developmental things that are really a nuisance. And I'd like the town to significantly think about, I know Jefferson Road, where it narrows, has become a real hardship for people getting on and off Jefferson Road. And it's going to be worse because down in Pittsford, they're putting all of the apartments in on the east side of the golf course. And now that the new Y is in down there, there's a lot of traffic and traffic turning on and off the roads. I've almost been rear-ended numerous times when I slow up to turn into my street, because my street does not make an exact 90-degree turn. It cuts back in. So you really do have to slow down a little bit to cut back in. Those are some of the things that I think we should start looking forward, not to just some of the issues that are today. I'd like to see the board start thinking about some of those things, especially the lot size north of the thruway. I think that would be a wonderful thing for us to do at this time. Thank you.
Thank you for your feedback. I will note that the town has started some green initiatives with regards to our own campus. And we are pursuing additional grant opportunities to be able to do some additional actions. There are solar panels on the roof of Town Hall. They probably could use some refurbishing, a new go at it. There are a number of green infrastructures around. We have put in electric vehicle chargers and are looking to put in more. My deputy town supervisor, Craig Eckert, has pursued a number of those through NYSERDA. And we are looking to convert all of our streetlights to LEDs, as well as our park lights as well. In fact, that's probably something that you're going to see, I would guess, on the July agenda, is to go out to bid to get those, to get proposals for doing that conversion. So there are a number of those in the works. And a lot of that, I suspect the other stuff you were talking about in that regards, you're going to see coming out of the Sustainability Committee.
Well, can you still hear me?
I can.
Okay. My point being, a lot of the developers love Henrietta because they can come in here and develop. And I think one of the things that'll slow them down is to do some of the things that will protect us as a community and the people that are moving in, not myself personally, but if someone wants to buy a new home and it has a secondary energy source put in originally by the builder, that would protect a lot of the people and give a safe haven for neighborhoods that are developing. I think the larger lot size will stop some of these multiple dwelling home type things that they're putting in. And especially please with Jefferson Road. I know Senator Schumer, when he was involved in the western part of the development, he said, oh, we're not going to have any more streetlights and this and that and the other thing, and we're going to make the traffic. Well, with all it developed now between Clover and Winton, it's a mess. So just things like that, and especially roads that we're thinking are going to become more traveled by development as we go further out in Henrietta. But right now, north of the thruway and the farmland and the green, let's keep it more like it is, rather than developing every square inch.
So the only thing I will note on that is that the people who own those properties have rights.
Absolutely.
Right, so the point is, you know, if we, for instance, in the new Tudor neighborhood, said that every other house when it sold had to be demolished, instead of selling, had to be demolished and turned into green space.
My point.
The people who
No,
own
no, no.
would be up and down.
I'm saying going forward.
I understand, but
Okay.
I'm just making clear, you've got to also take into account the landowners. We've put in a lot of things to try to preserve green space, and we'll continue to do that. But we have to do it in a manner that does not violate the property rights.
Rights of people, certainly, agreed,
So,
agreed. That's what I'm saying. There has to be a compromise, because that's becoming something that's happening a lot. It's certainly happened in our section. And I'm not doing it for us because it's already past due, and there's nothing I can do here, particularly, but in other areas of Henrietta, it could be a problem, and I'm trying to avoid it in the future.
appreciate that. And like I said, we'll take a look at what we do, and we've put some measures in place, and we'll continue to look at others.
Thank you. Kudos for that.
Was that all raised hands, Becky?
Nope, it looks like Kevin Yost also has his hand raised.
Yes, good evening. I'm Kevin Yost, 1474 Mill Road. I swear this will be the last time. I was mentioning about at the last town board meeting about some sort of, I guess, a fitness trail or something in Breeze Park. I'm wondering that's probably similar to what the Rotary Club had put in Tinker Park, and what they'd also them and their high school world Interact Club back in the early 90s had put on the trail on the west end of Veterans Park. Long before that became part of Lehigh Valley Trail, and unfortunately that in Veterans Park was let to fall apart and had to be removed. There's conflicting reasons as to why I've heard conflicting reasons as to why only town employees can do everything, but staying and staining is only what the Rotary Club or any other Suffolk club can do. And then as for a possible park on Castle Road, perhaps that could be the new Hoskins Park, and Hoskins can simply be nature and trees and stuff, preserve the land there, the corner of Winton and Pinnacle Roads, between there and the two churches, and then amenities move to Castle. There could be a fitness kiosk, like a four-sided kiosk, like was in the park where my father's side of the family in Pennsylvania is, and in other parks too, as I suggested, and maybe a fitness trail along Andrews Trail, and then maybe at this point, I don't really see the need to acquire the North Tinker property, or then I do realize that the restroom in the historian's office is down steps and therefore not accessible. I do support preserving the house, and like we did the Sherman House tonight, and given the approvals of the current owner and the historic site committee, and then the 0.4 acre corner of Summer Sky and Highland Drive between there and the fast track station perhaps the town could purchase that land that's for sale and keep it preserved like they do Hoskins. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a note, there couldn't be a fitness trail at Castle Road because it's a nature conservancy. As far as Hoskins Park, that's where we were looking at to have the Educators Grove. It would basically be a ring of benches with trees around it. But there was no plan to put a playground or anything like that at Hoskins Park. The rest would basically be nature, trails. Trails is too strong a word because it's not a huge park, but walking paths, I think, is a better term. And as far as at Breeze Park, it's as much of a play trail. So think of it as a fitness trail for kids. So it's got climbing structures and ninja wall and like balance beam and things like that. So it's not quite the same as the fitness trail that's at Tinker, but it does have some fitness things, but again, it's more geared towards children. Okay, committee and miscellaneous reports.
Do you want me to go? I'm just looking at a date here. I have a date here and it's, okay. Library report. As of July 14th, the library will be back to pre-COVID hours. The library is also going to be a site for early primary voting, and the voting is going to start on Saturday at 9 a.m. If you want the days and times that the voting is going to be going on, you can either check the monroecounty.gov/elections early voting, or I also noticed the Henrietta calendar lists the dates and times. The library is having their events team look at piloting a few limited attendance in-person events in June and July, which is great news. They will be continuing Zoom events. And the Historical Site Committee, just congratulations to Tyler. It's great. I know the committee just loves helping people to make their homes to get historical site designation. So if you live in a historical home and you want to look into this, please reach out to the historical site. That's it. As everyone's probably aware, the school district is wrapping up, and there's a lot of fantastic end of year activities that are going on, including graduation, prom, senior ball, and a number of different ceremonies. But one of the most important activities that for the town to be aware of is they are having their roundup. If many of you may remember last year, they had a parade for graduating seniors along Pinnacle and Lehigh Station. And they are planning on doing that on June 21st from 4 to 6 p.m. So there will probably be a significant amount of traffic as the seniors drive by in their decorated vehicles.
Right.
For the Parks and Rec, the RH Kicking Hunger 5K was held this past Saturday at Veterans Memorial Park. There was 251 registered participants. The vast majority of them raced in person with COVID protocols in place. Some did it virtually or on their own. This year's event raised just under $10,000 to support RH Kicking Hunger Food Pantry. I want to thank all the participants, all the volunteers, and the Sheriff's Department that helped with traffic also. Oops. The Henrietta Gymnastics hosted a USAIGC New York State Gymnastic Meet this past weekend. Had 20 competitors. Was a really good success. You can view the pictures if you want to on the Parks and Rec homepage or Facebook page, excuse me. And congratulations to competitors and thanks to all the staff and parent volunteers. Vendor space is still available for the July 4th craft and garage sale at the Henrietta Senior Center. Call 359-7055 if you're interested. Henrietta will be hosting the 4th of July celebration with entertainment by Brass Taxi beginning at 7:45 PM, followed by the fireworks at 9:45. Pre-registration is not required, but if you prefer a parking spot to view from your vehicle, register at Parks and Recreation.henrietta.org or in person at the rec center. There'll be several food vendors there, but no children's activities this year. And then also registration is open for all summer programs, including the Summer Smart Playground. Check out the full list of programs at henrietta.org/park and recreation. And that begins July 6th, the programs. So.
Just to expand on a couple things that Mike had just talked about, the competitors, a number of competitors from Henrietta and that state meet, they medaled, as well as I think there were a couple team medals as well. So again, you can see those on the Facebook page. I think they've also been shared to Henrietta Highlights. And as far as the 4th of July goes, the thing about the registration for parking, there are some people who are still not comfortable being out in crowds. And so if they would like to view either the fireworks and the band, we have set aside some parking area for people to view from their car. We'd like you to pre-register so we can just have you print out a pass and have it in your windshield when you drive in. So you'll be able to watch the fireworks from the safety of your car, you know, especially for people who might be vulnerable and were unable to get vaccinated. There will be social distancing at the blankets. One of the things we did as we are setting up a temporary bandstand over by the fireworks so that you can find a seat once and view both the band and the fireworks from that seat. There will also be a portion of the parking lot that for closer up viewing of the band, and or if people want to dance to Brass Taxi, they'll be able to dance there. But we're basically trying to make it as normal as possible while still dealing with the COVID rules. We just got an update from the county today in terms of how some of the rules are interpreted, because one of the things is maximum gathering size is 500 people. But it was made clear that has to do with, like, if we had a venue, because there are effectively multiple venues, you essentially get 500 each. So there'll be 500 in front of the band, 500 on the hill, 500 in the parking lot, 500 who watch from the streets. You know, the people watch our fireworks from all over. So there won't be an issue there. But as Mike mentioned, normally on the 4th of July, we'd have an all-day event with kids' activities and things like that, because especially since kids are not currently vaccinated, and there is still, whereas our positivity rate has dropped tremendously, there's still enough, and especially at the time when we were putting these plans together, the maximum gathering was, I think, 100 people at that point. We just didn't know what was going to be available and didn't want to put our kids in harm's way. So we decided to forego the kids' activities this year. Hopefully they'll be back next year. But we absolutely, as I said to a reporter from Channel 10 in an interview yesterday, I didn't care what the governor said, we were going to light off fireworks. And if he came and slapped my hand, so be it. But so we'll be having the fireworks, we'll be having the band. Because stuff has opened up some, we're going to have some food vendors there. But like I said, the all-day activities we're not going to be doing. Rob, did you have anything?
I don't have anything besides, I know the zoning board is going to be very happy about this driveway law passing. So
And I
thanks to
promise
everyone.
Signs are coming soon.
Thanks to everyone who had input on that.
Any others? Hearing none, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Meeting adjourned.